Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're going to be talking about taxes. And my guest today is Jim Morris. He is an AARP volunteer with Tax-Aid. Thank you so much for being here, Jim.
Thank you, Catherine.
So you wear two hats, the AARP Tax-Aid, and we're going to get into how complicated your job is, but you're also a VITA volunteer.
That's correct.
So you are all about the taxes, and you have been for like 25 years. So give us a little background about how you got involved in doing taxes.
Well, what happened was I was at a meeting and they said they needed people to help seniors do their taxes. So my parents would never be able to do those taxes. And fortunately for them, their income wasn't high enough that they had to do that. But I knew that there was a need. So I said, yep, sign me up. I'll help seniors do their taxes.
And that was like how many years ago?
About 28 years ago.
28 years ago. That's a long time to be helping seniors with their taxes. And the taxes have changed a lot.
They have changed a lot, but the seniors are they appreciate what you do for them. So that makes it very rewarding.
So you actually started out being a volunteer, and then they kind of upped your responsibility and then upped your responsibility and...
Right. I was unhappy with the training that I received the first year because all they were doing was updating people, and I had no background. Because when they said, now here's the changes to selling your home, I said, I don't know anything about selling a home. So I wrote they wanted an evaluation. So I gave them a 2-page evaluation, mostly complaints. So they asked me, well, you're complaining about all this stuff. Would you be a volunteer? And I said, yes, I will. So the second year I was an instructor. And the third year I was running what's called sites, or locations where people can go and get their taxes done. So in Arlington now we only have 2 sites, but there used to be like 10. So I was running 4 of those.
And so now you're doing kind of quality control too. So
right, I do mainly quality, what they call quality review, and that is after the taxpayer has sat down with someone else and they've entered all the information, and then I go and sit with the taxpayer and all the papers that they brought with them, and then I double check to make sure all the information on those papers are showing up on the return.
So walk us through who might need your services and how they would access volunteers who would help them with their taxes.
Okay, if someone wants someone to do their taxes for them for free, the only thing that would prevent that from happening is if they had rental property.
Right.
We don't do rental property. Otherwise, we do just about everything. The way they need to do is go online, go to Google, put in, I'm trying to remember what it was.
You can actually just Google AARP Tax-Aid too, because that's how I got to information as well.
Well, but that only gives you some of it, okay?
Right.
So you'd really want to Google IRS space TCE slash, IRS space VITA slash TCE.
So explain to everybody too what those terms mean, what VITA and TCE mean.
Okay, VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. That's one program. The other program is TCE, Tax Counseling for the Elderly. For AARP, that's called Tax-Aid. So those are 2 of the programs that are IRS sponsored who do taxes for free for people.
Okay.
So you would Google that in and then look for the result that says free tax return, and then a little further over it says volunteers, and click on that. And then you'd scroll down, and there'll be 2 buttons toward the bottom. You want to use both of these to get both the VITA locations and the Tax-Aid locations to have your taxes done. And when you go to have your taxes done, you should bring the following items: all your W-2s, all your 1099s, all your 1095s, expenses for any self-employment and any income taxes you may have paid into. Plus, you're going to want your Social Security cards or ITIN papers for everybody, and photo IDs for the individual or one each for the couple. And if possible, if you could bring your last year's tax returns, that really helps us. And finally, a checkbook or a check. The check can be a blank check, a canceled check, a voided check, and that would be for direct deposit. We do not want deposit slips. Those do not work all the time.
Right, right.
Okay.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So people need to gather up before they come to meet with a volunteer. Now, I think you said one of your centers makes appointments.
Right. The only one in Northern Virginia that I'm aware of is the Arlington County Central Library. And they do taxes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this year they're going to also be open on the last day, April 15th, that's a Monday. Now, Tuesdays, the hours are 10 to 7. And on Thursdays, it's 10 to 3. On the last day, it's going to be 10 to 7 again.
Okay. And so for the locations, it's basically first come, first serve. So people should.
Right. Normally, that's what it is.
So people need to come prepared to wait.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, I mean, there's still time for people to get there's always the procrastinators. You know, I was married to a procrastinator, so I know about the line at the Maryfield post office at midnight on the 15th of April. Very well acquainted with that. So people still have time. And what about filing an extension if necessary?
You can file an extension. Now, it's an extension to file, not an extension to pay.
Right.
And you don't have to have a special reason. You don't have to say, I must have this extension because they don't even ask for a reason. You get a 6-month extension and
right. And so you're
no
set.
questions asked. But they expect you, if you are going to be owing money, they want you to send the money in with that extension.
And so after April 15th, I mean, are your volunteers people who just work for a certain period of time from like January to April, or?
Right. It's from the beginning of February to the middle of April.
Right.
And so after that,
you're on your own, right? So think
you're
twice about filing an extension, because then you're going to be on your own.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And this year, unfortunately, they've done away with some of the 1040 forms. The 1040A and the 1040EZ, those are gone, unfortunately. So those who have used them in the past and like to wait until the last minute to prepare their taxes should do themselves a favor and look now at the god-awful new Form 1040. Now, instead of being what you had the previous years,
Right.
this form,
One pager.
nice one page, you now have a booklet.
A booklet, a
A
whole
whole
booklet.
booklet. And what it basically is, they've chopped up the form,
Right.
and a lot of these pages are blank. Some of them have just a couple of lines.
Yeah.
It's not
So,
easy to work with.
you know, this is far from simplifying our taxes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was a dream. So what else has changed? I mean, I think a lot of people are very distressed right now about whether or not they've had enough taxes withheld. I mean, that's what we're seeing in the news, in the headlines, in the media, is people are just so surprised that they owe money for the first time.
They owe money. One thing you have to be careful of is underwithholding, okay? And that can happen easily. And for 2018, they put out things to work with that didn't work, okay? So they made some changes on the penalty for underwithholding. The IRS has twice lowered the threshold. Originally, you would have had to pay at least 90%. Well, in January, they lowered that to 85%, and just recently they lowered it to 80%. And you're expected to file the Form 2210 with your return to ask for the waiving of that penalty.
Right.
Now, if you've already filed your taxes, then there's another form that you need to complete to get that money back, and that's Form 843.
That sounds so complicated.
It is complicated. Now, one other thing that's been going on is they say, well, the exemptions went away. Well, the answer to that is sort of. The standard deduction has been doubled for most people, and the child tax credit has been doubled for most people. And now there's something new called credit for other dependents. And those are people in your household who don't qualify for the child tax credit. An example would be a parent. If you had a parent living with you. A dependent
parent, right.
Right. Now, to be the dependent, you have to pay more than 50%
of their care.
Right.
Right.
And if that's true, then you treat them as this new term, another dependent, and you get up to $500 credit for that person.
Okay. You know, and that kind of reflects the lifestyle changes that a lot of people have. People are living much longer. Exactly. And so, you know, people who might be retired might actually be caring for an elderly parent who's living with them.
Exactly.
And so it's good to see that the tax code is actually reflecting a change in our culture, a broad one.
Another thing they might have is also grandchildren that they're taking care of.
And there's a lot of reasons for that too.
Yes.
There's a lot of grandparents raising their grandchildren, and that is, you know, and again, tax relief, you know, just recently, kind of not related, but sort of related, is that, you know, they're trying to do kinship foster care so that instead of putting kids in a foster care system, they're putting them with relatives. But up to this point, relatives didn't get foster care payments because they weren't in the foster care system as foster care parents. So that has changed too, to offset the expenses for family members who are actually caring for a child that's in the foster system.
Another thing that a grandparent would have to be aware of if they're still working is they would be eligible for the earned income credit, where normally when you hit 65, you're out of luck.
Right.
If you're still working, you're not going to get a penny. But if you're taking care of a grandchild, then you're eligible. That age thing goes away.
That is amazing. And Jim, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get more information from Jim Morris about what you need to know on taxes.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist!
Use STEM to build, create,
She did it!
and change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Hi.
Hi.
Patience. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. Today we are talking taxes with Jim Morris, who is with AARP Tax-Aid. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us today, Jim, because I know taxes are foremost on everybody's mind.
That's right, Catherine.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are particular to seniors as far as IRS scams. We've heard a lot about it. We know that seniors are very vulnerable to all kinds of scams, but it's particularly frightening when you think the IRS is calling you on the phone.
Right. The IRS never calls you on the phone.
Never.
Never. They communicate via regular mail. If you get a phone call that's from the IRS, you know for sure it is a scam.
So don't be afraid, and don't give out any personal information.
Exactly. Nothing. Give them nothing. They may have part of your information. They may say, well, just to make sure you know who we are, blah, blah, blah. They also, this is the really bad part, they can have, if you have caller ID, it shows up that it is from the IRS, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
It is frightening, and a lot of seniors have gotten caught up in that. So the best way is to simply, the IRS will never call you.
Right, and for the seniors, don't be so trusting.
Yeah.
Don't distrust everybody, but think about it before you give out any information.
So the IRS, if they want to communicate with you, is going to be through snail mail.
Correct.
And it will be stamped with all of the appropriate governmental things on it so that you know.
Right, it'll be a bunch of papers and you have difficulty trying to read through what are they
asking?
Right.
And what should people do other than try not to panic if they do get a letter from the IRS, for instance, saying that there was a problem with their taxes? I mean, they can file an amended tax return.
Right.
You don't ever want to do that?
Well, sometimes you have to do that.
Right.
Because you can have forgotten something. Now, the form that you use is the 1040X. It's not a user-friendly form, but that's the form that you have to use in order to make changes to your return. And it's not, not a big deal. And if
It's
you have
not the end of the world.
Right, and if you have to do another one, you do another one.
I can tell you, when I get anything from the government, I freak out immediately. It's kind of like when I see blue lights behind me. It's kind of like, even though I know I'm not doing anything wrong, and they usually just drive past me, I just immediately sort of like freeze, like, oh no, what did I do? And I think I'm not the only one who feels that way.
Yeah,
You know, it's kind of like the IRS is sending me a letter. Right. So what other things should people be aware of this year?
There's a lot of confusion about the penalty for not having health care.
Oh, yes.
Now, the thing to remember is for 2018 taxes, that was still in effect.
Right.
For 2019, it has gone away, but people are under the impression that for 2018 taxes, if I didn't have health insurance, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. You'll most likely get hit with that penalty.
So you have to note that on your taxes when you fill it out if you didn't have health insurance.
Right. That's the 1095 I mentioned earlier.
Ah, that's the 1095.
You need to bring those with you. So it tells you if you had health insurance and which months you had health insurance, because you may not have had it consecutive months of health insurance.
But some of our seniors are going to be eligible for Medicare.
Oh yes, if they have Medicare, they're covered.
Right, so you don't have to worry about any supplemental policy or additional policies. If you've got Medicare, no penalty for you. You've got health insurance.
Right.
It's if you're under 65, correct?
Right.
And whether or not you're working or not working is not germane to this. The whole point of the individual mandate was to make sure that people had some health coverage.
There are exceptions. If you're very low income and they know you cannot afford health insurance, then they're not going to hit you with the penalty.
This is kind of off topic, except that we had Medicaid expansion passed in Virginia in 2018. And so people who were previously not eligible for any coverage, even if they were low income, if they were single and low income, a lot of people weren't until they expanded Medicaid, and then suddenly they have health insurance. Does that in any way impact?
It shouldn't, because their income would be low enough that they're not required to have health insurance. It's good if they have it, but.
Okay, well that's, like I said, everything changes from year to year, and I think that's one of the things that throws people off when they sit down to do their taxes. Every year there's something new they need to know.
Well, one thing that they do need to know for this year is whether they should file itemized deductions or standard deductions.
That's confusing everybody, including in my household, because we're not sure either.
Right. If you itemized when you did your 2017 taxes, and it looks like you shouldn't itemize for 2018, your best path is do it both ways, then add your federal to your Virginia on both, doing it both ways, and compare and see which one is better for you.
Right, and it may be different for everybody.
Right, because you might pay a little bit more on your federal, but you're going to get maybe a lot more back on your state, because the standard deduction on the state is only $3,000. But let's say you had $10,000 worth of itemized expenses, then that's an extra $7,000 that you're not going to have to pay tax on in Virginia.
Right. And this is what I think confuses a lot of people, including me.
It is. It's not, you don't even think about it.
No, and most of us aren't tax experts
It used to be, there was a very limited window that would be, that would work for people. Now the window is very wide, and it doesn't hurt to do it both ways.
Right. And so people, and this is again something that you'll help people with, although how often would seniors be itemizing anyway?
Well, you'd be surprised, because you'll have, like, let's say a widow who doesn't have a lot of income, but they're paying a fortune in real estate taxes.
Oh, right.
Okay.
So explain those caps. That was another thing that happened with the tax reform.
Right. Now, you hear the word SALT as well as the word cap. SALT is state and local taxes. Now, what those are is 1, income tax or sales tax, 2, real estate taxes, and 3, personal property taxes. You add those 3 up and see what the total is. The cap is now $10,000. So if you add those 3 up and they exceed $10,000, you only can claim $10,000. Now, if you're married filing separately, it's $5,000 is the cap. So this is where people are going to...
Because it caused quite an uproar in people, especially who live in areas like the Metro DC area, where income taxes are high because the value of the property is very high, and where you pay personal property taxes on your Lexus or your Tesla. And so you're paying personal property taxes and you're paying real estate taxes on these enormously expensive. So chances are it could be in excess of $10,000.
Easy to do. Now, while we're talking about state income tax, there's, you've probably heard about that every person in Virginia is going to get an extra $110 later this year.
Right.
Well, that's not necessarily true. It all depends on the tax liability that's on the Virginia Form Line 19. If that number is 0, you're not going to get an extra $110. Now, if it's between $1 and $109, you will get that exact amount.
Right.
If it's over 110, then you'll get the 110 unless we're talking about a couple, and then it can be up to $220.
But that's more of a credit. In other words, you file your taxes, that is calculated, and then later in the year...
You may get a nice surprise.
You might get a nice little check.
Exactly. Small check to compensate for maybe what you've lost.
Right. Yeah, maybe what you've lost. But it's very situational. So just people who may have heard everybody's going to get an extra 110, it's conditional.
Right, exactly.
So what other kind of things should people be looking out for this year?
Well, there's a little trick you can play on when you're doing your itemizing, especially with the cap. If you find that it's worthwhile to switch when you're itemizing from Virginia income tax to Virginia sales tax, when you get over to your Virginia tax, when you put down your itemized, you have to subtract out whatever you've claimed as Virginia state income tax. But instead of state income tax, if you claim the sales tax, you don't have to subtract that out.
That sounds super complicated.
Well,
I'm trying to visualize this in my head, and it's very hard.
It's just something that you don't think of, but this tax year for 2018, you've got to be thinking of ways to get around having to pay all these extra taxes.
So extra taxes, that's an interesting thing that you just said there, extra taxes, because people believe that the tax reform, A, made it simpler, which your booklet just showed us wasn't made simpler. But now, by raising the standard deduction, everybody kind of thinks, well, it's simpler. I don't have to do, but you just said the word extra taxes. So we need to be a little bit more informed as consumers.
People are getting a lot of surprises. People who were used to getting refunds and they didn't do anything different, this year they're having to pay.
Because there was not adequate withholding, even though they never changed their withholding.
Well, a combination of things. There's not enough withholding, the cap.
Right.
Okay.
Which is why they need to check with. Even if you think you've done your taxes right in the past, it might be worth checking online resources, checking with a volunteer, because you don't really want to file amended taxes.
Right. You may want to even pick up what I call my Bible, is J.K. Lasser's. Now, it'll say 2019 taxes, but it's the 2019 book to do your 2018 taxes. And it really covers everything. So if you're doing your taxes yourself, either on paper or on the computer, it's nice.
Get the
to
Lasser book.
I would say so, and I don't get a
commission or a kickback
like that. But it's a thick book, paperback, and it's $25.
But it's worth it.
It's definitely worth it.
Even though you can't deduct on your taxes.
Right. Well, the other thing that you had mentioned, what's changed is on the itemizing, you used to be able to get extra things like broker's fees,
right,
safety deposit boxes, union fees. Gone.
Gone.
Gone away.
Sad news. But thank you so much, Jim, for being here.
All right.
And this is what you need to know about your taxes.